Okay, hey, so we said we need to factor trinomials when a is not equal 1. Well, we kind of know what factoring means. We talked about factoring in a couple different ways. Talking about a new one today. You know what a trinomial is? A trinomial is how many terms? Three. This tri means 3. So that means we need to figure out a. What's a? Well, here in our title it says when the leading coefficient doesn't equal 1. What's coefficient mean? A number next to a variable. It's a coefficient. Okay? A number that's next to a variable is being multiplied with that variable. Now, we had linear equations. Linear equation was where x, our variable, was to the power of 1. Now, remember, if you guys remember a linear equation, when we graphed it, what kind of graph did it make? A straight line. Linear equation made a straight line here. We also wrote it like y equals mx plus b, our slope-intercept form. We also had our standard form, which was ax plus by is equal to c. And that was our linear equation. And if you even looked at the word linear, you kind of see that word line inside of it, saying, hey, that's going to be a straight line. Well, what we're going to be talking about right now is quadratic equations. So this word quadratic is going to be kind of the key word right now. So quadratic equation. Quadratic just means that instead of having a power of 1 on our x, our variable, we're going to have a power of 2. We're going to have a power of 2 there. So it's going to be squared. So in these, instead of having a power of 1, it's going to be a power of 2. And our graph won't look like a straight line anymore on these. Our graph won't look like a straight line anymore. We'll talk more about what those will look like. But it won't be a straight line like it was before for linear equations. It's different. It's a different type of equation. So anytime our biggest power is 2 for x, it's a quadratic equation. That's a word that's going to keep coming up in math over and over again, kind of from this point forward. Okay? And we have the standard form for quadratic, which is ax squared plus bx plus c. Well, here, yes. Yep, it'll come a little more natural to us because we're going to use it. So, hey, this might be the a Mr. Costle was kind of talking about up on the board. When he said a doesn't equal 1. Well, leading, what's leading mean? The first, okay? The first coefficient doesn't equal 1. Well, what would be the first coefficient in this? A. So is that probably the same thing when leading coefficient doesn't equal 1 and a doesn't equal 1? Are those going to be really the same thing here?
But is a always going to be the
Well, it won't always be written that way, but we will rearrange it that way. That's a great question because it won't always be given to us that way, but we rearrange it that way. Because here, we said standard form for polynomials in general. We want to be descending, don't we? We want to go from the greatest exponent to the least. Is that how this is right now? Yeah, it is. That's how it is. Because we have x squared, x to the first, and there's no x over here. So we already have it in standard form. And so when we're in standard form, a will always be our leading coefficient. So when we say leading coefficient and a, they really mean the same thing in this context. So here, we're just going to focus on identifying a, b, and c. So if we look here, we have a quadratic equation of number 1. It's x squared, something x squared, bx, and just a c, a number by itself, and no x. We have an x squared, an x to the first, and a number by itself with no x. So here, what would be the a in this scenario? Just 3. Because here, a is whatever's being multiplied with x squared. Well, here, 3 is being multiplied with x squared. What would our b be? 5. What kind of 5? Negative 5. Be careful here, because here is a positive, and here it's negative. So that means it's really a negative 5. And what would our c be then? Negative 2. Okay, our c would really be negative 2 there. Questions on that first one, how we identify as a, b, and c. Okay, we just make sure, hey, we're in our standard form, x squared, x to the first, and no x. And we say, okay, well, now what are the coefficients? Making sure we use whatever sign is there. I want you guys to do number 2. So go ahead and do number 2. Identify A, B, and C. And when you do, raise your hand. Or if you have questions, raise your hand. Make sure if you haven't had it checked yet, you're raising your hand to have it checked.
And the visors were. And I had to, no, I had to.
But of course, it's gonna seem easy, and then you.
And so I had to do some of your items. Wait, let me be your street.
One. Okay, attention back up here, please. Attention back up here, please. Okay, so here, A, what coefficient's in front of x squared if we don't see 1? 1. So A is 1. B is 2. And C is 1. Questions on number 2. And on number 3, are we in our standard form right away? No. That means we need to put it in our standard form, okay? I suggest writing it off to the right there where you have some space. So put this in standard form, and then identify A, B, and C. So go ahead and put this in standard form. Take a second to put this in standard form. And then after you put it in standard form, what should we have? Ben, what'd you get for your standard form?
Like the numbers?
The order, yeah.
So 2x squared and then 7x and then 5.
Yeah. So we'll just kind of flip the last two because we need the x to be in front of the one with no x, our constant. So now I want you to find A, B, and C. And let's do the same thing. Raise your hand when you're done. Okay, so find the A, B, and C here.
There you go. Hey, oh, no, no,
Somebody check raise your hand.
remind you that
What?
just put a
Yeah. What'd you get?
Okay, good. That's crossing with me.
Yeah.
no, I'm taking that to initial class from Mr. Howard. Guess what I got? A balloon?
I got a
Let's do-
45.
No, in Mr. Howard.
Okay.
On Mr. Howard's test.
Who?
Wait,
Okay.
are we doing that?
We're doing it today.
Like, we
No, we're doing it next week. We're doing it next block.
We're doing it today.
Okay, attention back up here. Attention back up here.
It's like a practice.
So A is
X5.
2, B is,
7.
and C is 5. Questions over these of just identifying A, B, and C. We haven't done any true math yet. We're just identifying parts of this. Just to make sure that stays away. Thank you.
You can just stick to this one.
Oh, okay, that's not.
This guy like kindergarten, pre-K there.
Hey, so focus back up here. So these were what we call trinomials, right? There's three terms there. And we had them in our standard form. So we're gonna learn how to factor these. So we're gonna learn a way to factor these. Okay, it's kind of like a puzzle. Okay, what we're gonna do is kind of like a puzzle. So we can do it with grouping, but we have to rewrite it a bit. So we're gonna make it into grouping. So when we factor by grouping, like we did earlier, like we did up here in the last worksheet, how many terms did we have? 4. How many terms do we have here though? 3. So we can't group because we don't have 4 terms. But what we're going to do is we're going to make it have 4 terms. And we're going to figure out how and just what those 4 terms will be. So you have to make sure it's in the proper order. ax squared plus bx plus c. We make sure it's the proper order just like we did in that last problem. We made sure it's in the order before we identified anything. Then we're going to make an x. We're going to make an x, and we'll talk about how to do that. It says the two numbers are going to multiply for what a and c's would be. We're going to put a number where a times c is at the top, and we're going to put b on the bottom. We're going to talk about that, what that means. Okay. Right next to this, I want you guys to write a little x in here. Okay, you guys have a little bit of space off to the left. Off to the left, you have a little bit of space. I want you to draw an x here with some space in between. So we're going to write some numbers in there. Okay. In the top part, I want you to write A times C. In that little top part, I want you to write A times C. And in the bottom, I just want you to write B. So the top's A times C, and in the bottom there is B. And you have to put them in those spots. We'll put them in those spots every single time. And so let's start kind of walking through here. So here with our first example, and we'll continue on. So here with our first example, is this in standard form? Is it an ax squared plus bx plus c form?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, we have it in our descending order. So now, let's start off the same way we did with identifying our a, b, and c. So what's a, what's b, and what's c? A is, b is -7, and c is -15. So we're going to identify our A, B, and C, so we make sure it's in order, and we identify A, B, and C. That's step 1. Step 2, what I'm going to do here, guys, is I'm going to underline this to make sure we have it in step 1. Step 2 here, we're going to make an X. So we'll make an X, I'll make this off to the side here. And we're going to fill it in. So here we said the top's going to be A times C. So what would A times C be? 2 times -15. -30. So that's going to go on our top here. And what do we say is going to go on the bottom? B, in which case this is -7. Now what we were looking for is we're going to try and complete our X. How many empty spots do we still have in this X? 2. We have the left and the right. So these, yes, Grace? Ooh, sometimes it just be like that. So we're going to use these left and the right, and we're going to figure out we need 2 numbers that multiply to -30. They're 2 factors of -30 together, but they have to add up to -7. It's going to be 2 numbers that multiply to -30, but add to -7. It's going to be a little bit like a puzzle here. So we're going to need to figure out factors of 30 that add up to -7. But here, if it's a -30, what kind of numbers are we going to have multiplying? Are they going to be 2 positive numbers?
1 negative, 1 positive.
It's going to be 1 negative and 1 positive. So I'm going to put a negative sign out here on the left because this number on the left is going to be negative, and the number on the right is going to be positive.
I got one.
Okay? What are you thinking?
Okay, so positive 10,
Okay?
negative 3.
Okay, so if we have positive 10 times -3, that would give us -30. And what would positive 10 plus -3 give us? Positive 7. So what might we need to do? We got 7,
Negative
but maybe make 10 negative, and the 3 positive, because it's negative 10 times positive 3, still negative 30.
Wait, the 10 minus 3 is 7.
Yes. But we need to be what kind of 7? A negative 7. So we were close, and so that's how we know, oh, we got the same thing but different sign? We'll flip the signs. So negative 10 plus 3 would be negative 7. So we have two numbers that multiply at the top and add to the bottom. Questions on filling out that x. This is a very important step here, is filling out that x.
We did nice one by ourselves.
We're not done yet. So, then on to step 3 in purple here, we're going to rewrite our trinomial. And these two numbers we came up with, it's going to replace our middle, our bx. And it's going to create 4 terms. So what we do is we're going to write our first one like normal. 2x squared is still going to be 2x squared. Negative 7x now becomes negative 10x plus 3x. And this last one stays the same as negative 15, or minus 15. Now, the reason this works is because we still have negative 10 and 3. If we combined these like terms, what would we get? Negative 7x, is that what we started with? So we're saying mathematically this is the same, we're just making it look a little different. We're not actually changing the value, we're just making it look a little different. Okay, we're making it just look a little different.
Wouldn't that make it 2x squared minus, because then if you minus 7 on both sides, instead of just one side. If there being once negative 7.
We don't have negative 7x anymore. We said it's the same thing as negative 10x plus 3x. Because if we combine these like terms, we would get that. And right now, these are just adding and subtracting. So we're kind of split our middle term. Our first and our last term stay the same. Our first term stay the same. Last term stay the same. Our middle term is kind of split into these. And we have to have whatever variables we have with the middle with these as well. We just take these as their coefficients.
So that's your answer.
That's for step 3. And we have one more step here.
Oh, your
So now step 4, factor by grouping. Hey, how many terms do we have now? 4. So can we factor by grouping? Yeah, so how do we do that? Group them together. So our first 2 in the parentheses and the last 2 in the parentheses, taking that sign with the third term. And we look for GCFs, don't we? So 2x squared minus 10x, what's the GCF of that? 2x, very good. And we'd be left with what in the parentheses?
X squared.
X, just normal x,
Oh, what?
minus just 5, because we took an x out. And in the second parenthesis, 3x and negative 15, what goes into both of those? 3. And what's 3x divided by x? Or 3x divided by 3x. Negative 15 divided by 3 is negative 5. Whew. Now, is this inside the parentheses the same thing? That's good, okay? This is now coming back to what we did before. So what are we going to do with this x minus 5? Put it in the front, in the first parenthesis. And what's going to go in the second parenthesis? 2x plus 3. And this is our answer. We now factored this. So, and if we were to multiply this back and combine like terms, we would get this answer. We could see that. It ends up being the same thing. So was step one new for today? Yeah, step 1 was a new step today. We've done stuff like that before, but it was a new step today for this. Was step 2 a new step today, the x? Yes. Okay, was step 3 rewriting it in the purple and splitting the middle term? Was that a new thing for us? Yeah. Was step 4 factoring by grouping in the orange? Was that new?
No.
No. Okay, so the first 3 steps were new, but our last step is old. So all we're doing is we're setting it up to factor by grouping again. We're saying, hey, a trinomial, well, we need to make that into 4 different terms. We're going to turn that into 4 terms. It was 3, we're going to turn it into 4. Devin, head up, please. gonna walk through this number 2 the same way. Okay, we're gonna walk through number 2 the same way here. So our first step is to make sure it's in the right order. Is this in the right order? No. What do we need to do? Switch to 4 and negative 20x. So let's do that. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna write it like right below it. 9x squared minus 20x plus 4. Is that better? Okay. And what else do we do in this light blue in this first step? Identify our A, B, and C. So A is what, B is what, and C is what? So A is 9. What's B? Negative 20. And what's C? 4. So see how this only works once we get it in the right form? Otherwise we can't do that. Couldn't have done it like that was originally. We had to change it. And so that's step 1. We made sure it's in the right order and we identified it. So now after we identify, we're going to move on to step 2, which is to make our x. To make our x. Now what goes in the top of this x? 36. How did you get that, Christian? 9 times 4. We take our A times C, which is 9 times 4. It can be different for any problem. And what's going to go on the bottom? Negative 20. How did you figure that? It's B. Whatever our B is, goes right there. And so now on the sides, we're going to be looking for two numbers that multiply to the top and add to the bottom. And we say, okay, well, in the top, so we can get an idea of what our signs were. Here, this was negative, so we know, okay, well, one's going to be negative, one's going to be positive. If it's positive, what do we know about the two number signs? There's going to be two positive or two negatives. These two negatives can make a positive, right, for multiplying? Okay, and so if we look down here, well, it's going to be two negatives. Why, Ben? The bottom's negative. So if they're going to add to a negative number, can two positive numbers ever add to a negative? No, that's not how that works. Two positives will always add to a positive. But two negatives add to a negative. So that's an idea of how we can fill this out. And start, hey, what about our signs? So when you think of factors of 36, that will add to negative 20. Justin, what are you thinking?
Negative 18 and negative 2.
Okay, negative 18 and negative 2. And maybe you don't see that right away. That's okay. That's where you start spitballing. And you say, okay, well, I know 9 and 4 are factors, so let's try that. Well, 9 plus 4 is 13. Okay, darn, that didn't work. Okay, well, what about, 13 and 2? Well, those are to 15, so not quite. And then you can keep going and keep going and keep going. And eventually, if you go through all the factors, you'll find 18 and 2. We can kind of walk through that more in a bit. Whew. So, did we do the red step where we fill in our x? We made an x and we filled all spots in, right? So now we move to rewriting it. So this was the step in the purple. We're going to rewrite it into 4 different terms. So what happens with this first term? Stays the same. What happens to our last term? What happens to our middle term though? It splits. How do we know what numbers we're going to put here? The ones on the sides of our x. So it's going to be negative 18 and negative 2. And what do you have to put behind the negative 18 and the negative 2? X. It's whatever was with this, because we're splitting it, so it has to stay whatever it was. And we have to also check, let's say, okay, well, if we combine these back, would we get negative 20x? If we combine negative 18x minus 2x, would we get that? Yeah. Okay, so we're doing it right, okay? Head up, please, Evan. So now we did step 3, where we rewrote it as 4 terms. So now that it's 4 terms, how can we factor this? By using our parentheses, which we call grouping. So we put it in our parentheses, and from here we factor it. From here we factor it. Okay? I want you guys to finish out factoring this. Okay, I want you guys to finish out factoring this. So go ahead and finish this one out. Okay? Finish out factoring this. This is like what we did earlier. When you're done, go ahead and raise your hand. Or if you have questions, go ahead and raise your hand. still have an x. So here, now we take negative 2 out of that. Also, that's 4 divided by negative 2. Right, minus 2. And now we have the same thing as the parentheses. Awesome, so we'll keep going from there. What number? You have 9 here. So I can change it.
But I wasn't sure.
So, does a 9 go into both of these? So what do you got? Then it stays there. So we need what's inside the parentheses to stay the same. So it's okay if this is different than that. Let's first divide by this. Okay, great.
Like Gucci Berry's better though. Gucci Berry. You see that? Feel like a fun one.
Okay. Hey, so in this first part, what's the GCF of this first parenthesis? 9
Oh, yeah.
x, and we're left with x minus. Here, what do we have to take out of this parenthesis? Negative 2. The first number is positive, so we're left with x minus 2. And what do we notice about our numbers inside the parentheses? They're the same, so we pull that out in front, x minus 2. And then in the next parenthesis, we have 9x minus 2. So once again, we follow the same 4 steps here. We follow the same 4 steps here, Wesley. Go ahead and flip the page. Okay, and we're going to follow these same steps again. Okay?
Can we do this by ourselves?
We're going to do this one together and then we'll do the next one by ourselves. I know. Okay? Hey, so our first step is to make sure they're in the right order. Are they?
That one?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so let's identify A, B, and C. Okay, Blake, what's A?
I flipped to the back.
Okay. Ben, what's A?
12.
12. Blake, I'll let you next time, okay? Okay, Josh, what's B? 5. Hannah, what's C? What kind of 2? Negative 2, okay? So after we make sure it's in the right form, and we identify, what's our step 2 say to do? Do the X, make an X. We can call it the X method is what this is often called. For factoring trinomials, it's called the X method because we make an X. Now how do we know what number to put on the top? A times C. So what's 12 times negative 2? Negative 24. And what number goes in the bottom? 5, whatever our B is. It's negative though, it's different. So, now, how do we figure out what goes here?
Puzzle it.
Puzzle it.
Okay.
Puzzle it.
What do these two numbers have to multiply to? The top, negative 24.
Yeah,
What do we have to add to? 5. And so we know we're going to have a negative and a positive. So here's a trick that's going to make your life easier. Whenever you have a negative and a positive, put the negative first. It's going to make your life easier. Okay? If you have a negative and a positive, put the negative first because that's going to make your life easier. Okay, just a heads up. If you put the negative first, you have a negative and a positive, it's going to make your life a lot easier. Okay? So, we need to think of factors of 24 that will have a difference of 5. Peyton. Okay, so 6 and 1 have a difference of 5, but do 6 and 1 multiply to 24? Darn it, so we need to get both though. So what's two things that can factor? What are two factors of 24, Josh? 8 and 3. Okay, so which one would be negative, which one would be positive? 8 would be negative? 8 Negative will be positive. Why'd you change that? Because 8 minus 3 is 5. We need it to stay positive, so the bigger number has to be positive. And it's 8 times 3, 24. So is 8 times negative 3 negative 24? Let's check this, guys. Is 8 times negative 3 negative 24?
Yes.
Okay. And is 8 plus negative 3 positive 5? Yeah. Okay. So now that we filled out our x, what's our next step? Now that we filled,
Factor. Well, like you have to.
we have to rewrite it, right?
Yeah.
Make it 4 terms. So somebody help me rewrite this.
12a to
12a squared
and then you have to split.
minus 3a plus 8a. We split this, and now what? Minus 2. So did we do our third step now? And now what's our fourth step? Factor by grouping, right? So we're going to group it into our parentheses here, and we're going to factor it again. We're going to factor just like we did the first couple there. Okay? So 12a squared minus 3a, what's the GCF of that? Not negative, because this is already positive. But just 3a, right? And so it's 12a squared divided by 3a. 4a. We can think of it in parts. 12 divided by 3 is 4. A squared divided by a is a. And what's negative 3a divided by 3a? Negative 1. Because anything divided by itself would be 1, but in this case, it's negative, because it's negative positive, right? In our second parenthesis, what are we going to factor out? 4. Does 4 go into 2, though? Darn it. So let's just do a 2. What's 8a divided by 2? What's negative 2 divided by 2? Do we have the same thing in the parentheses? Yes. Okay? That's kind of a way you can check, because if you don't have the same thing in the parentheses, we might have done something wrong. That can be a way we can check. So now, since we have the same thing in the parentheses, we'll put that 4a minus 1 out in front. And what's going in the second set of parentheses? 2. Questions on that one? Yeah. Okay. Okay, getting it. Here we go. That's awesome.
It's nice to meet you.
It's nice to meet you too. Hey, I want you guys to try number 4 on your own. So go through those steps, and let's try number 4 on your own. Yes. Yeah. This was positive, right? So we didn't need it. So we needed to factor out positive to keep it positive. And so it's positive 2. Does that make sense? What are those questions we needed? Was that for the x? Yeah. Yes. No. Because this is negative. So when I do the negative thing, remember they multiply it. You multiply 2 negatives, so they're negative. Positive and a negative, right? So a negative and this would be positive. If you're getting stuck on the factors, what to find on the sides of the x, start writing down factors of a number. Start writing down factors of a number. And say, oh, 1 in this number go into it, 2 in this number go into it, 3 in this number, so on and so forth. And then kind of see what pairs work. That's what
you
it's
will.
good.
No, like, we're not discussing stuff like maybe we would stop everybody from doing it. We're gonna put like
Will the following people please come to the guidance office after the bell? Donna Mayfield, Haley Hickla,
Is this in the right order?
Sarah Bates,
Yeah.
Lee Mike.
So that means we need to identify our A,
Please come to the
our
guidance
B,
office after the bell.
and so it just goes away. Our C. So what's our A here? 3. What's our B?
4.
-4. What's our C?
Oh yeah,
-4. So as we make our X here now, as we make our X, we continue on. What's going to go on the top? -12. We do A times C, so 3 times -4. What's going to go on the bottom? -4, whatever our B is. And now we need two numbers that multiply to -12 as -4. Well, if this is a negative, we're multiplying to a negative, what do we know about the two numbers? One's going to be negative, one's going to be positive. Where do we want to put the minus sign on, the left or the right? Let's put it on the left. It's going to make our life way easier. Okay? Plus the sign over here. So, two factors of 12 that have a difference of 4. 6 and 2, with the 6 being negative. Because this 4 is negative, so we need a bigger number to be negative. So now, we complete our X. We rewrite this now. Our first term stays the same. We split this middle term. -6y plus 2y. Make sure we have those y's with that. And it's -4. And then once we do that, what do we look to do now? Group them. Factor by grouping. Which is what 8.2 was. So what's our GCF here? 3y. And what's with y minus 2? What's going to be your GCF here? And we're going to be left with. And what do we notice about inside the parentheses? Same, that's good. The sign we're doing something right. So we put that out in front, 1 minus 2. And what's going to be the next parenthesis? 3y plus 2. And that would be our answer. Okay? Hey, I want, we're going to continue on with our notes on Wednesday here, okay? So heads up on Wednesday, what to expect. Don't pack up yet, guys, so it's going to be noisy, okay? I'll get you out of time. Okay? What to expect on Wednesday here is we're going to start our notes. We don't have much left to do. We're going to have a little bit of work time, and then we're going to start 8-4 as well, okay? So kind of similar to how we did it right before spring break, where we finished off one section, did the homework, and then started another section, did that homework. So just be prepared for that kind of a setup tomorrow, okay? For all Wednesdays. Okay? Now you may pack up. Stand
Why
up,
can't
wait.
you just do this on
Because we're not done with those yet.
Mr. Awesome.
Yeah.
Can you put me on the list?
If you want to be on the study hall list, that includes for wanting to correct a test or take a test,
Did I finish my
homework help, come back here and let me know.
Did I finish my corrections yet or no? I don't
Me.
remember if I did.